Ambassador James Reed stood at the viewport of the Earth ship New Horizon, watching as the massive Galactic Council station grew larger against the backdrop of countless stars. The structure was a marvel of engineering. A rotating wheel nearly 20 kilometers in diameter, with spokes of shimmering metal stretching from its central hub. Lights sparkled along its surface like diamonds scattered on black velvet. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" Captain Thompson remarked, joining Reed at the viewport. "Hard to believe we're the first humans to see it in person." Reed nodded, adjusting his simple blue diplomatic uniform. "Let's hope they're as impressive in person as their architecture suggests." The docking procedure took nearly an hour, with the Council's automated systems carefully guiding their ship into one of the smaller bays. Reed noticed their vessel was perhaps a quarter the size of the other diplomatic ships. He tried not to let it bother him. As Reed stepped through the airlock, he was met by a delegation of 3 beings. The tallest was a luminary, a creature of pure energy contained within a crystalline environment suit that sparkled with internal light. Beside it stood a representative of the Mech Collective, its metallic body polished to mirror-shine perfection. The third was a floating orb that Reed recognized as a thought sphere of the collective consciousness species. "Welcome to the Galactic Council Station," the luminary spoke, its words translated by the universal translator Reed wore. "I am First Speaker, Light of Ancient Wisdom. These are my colleagues, Processing Unit 7 Alpha and Consciousness Node Beta 12. Reed bowed slightly. "I am Ambassador James Reed of Earth. On behalf of humanity, I thank you for this opportunity." A slight shimmer passed through the luminary's form. Something Reed would later learn was their equivalent of a condescending laugh. "Yes, Earth, the planet that achieved faster than light travel barely 50 years ago. How quaint. We have reviewed your species' technological development path," Processing Unit 7 Alpha added, its metallic voice carrying an unmistakable tone of superiority. "Your reliance on chemical rockets for so long was most inefficient." Reed maintained his diplomatic smile. "We're proud of our achievements, even if they took time to develop." Pride in inefficiency. How typical of organic species in their early stages. Consciousness Node Beta 12 projected directly into Reed's mind. "Perhaps in a few thousand years, you'll develop past such emotional attachments." The group moved through the station's corridors, each step bringing fresh examples of advanced technology that made Earth's best achievements seem like children's toys. Other species representatives they passed either ignored them completely or washed with what Reed could only interpret as amusement. The council chamber itself was a vast amphitheater, with hundreds of different species represented. Reed stood at the speaker's podium, feeling very small as thousands of eyes, sensors, and other sensory organs focused on him. The human species, First Speaker Light of Ancient Wisdom announced to the chamber, requests full membership in the Galactic Council. A wave of what could only be described as laughter rippled through the chamber. "They still use biological neural networks for computation," someone called out. "Their ships run on fusion. Not even zero-point energy," another voice added. First Speaker Light of Ancient Wisdom raised an appendage for silence. "While we appreciate Earth's ambition, perhaps we should consider a more appropriate arrangement. I propose protectorate status, under the guidance of more advanced species." Reed felt his face grow warm, but he kept his voice steady. "With respect, First Speaker, humanity has met all the technical requirements for membership as outlined in the Galactic Charter. Meeting minimum requirements through crude methods hardly qualifies one for full membership," Processing Unit 7 Alpha interjected. "Your species still relies on verbal communication as a primary means of information exchange. How do you expect to contribute meaningfully to council deliberations?" Reed looked around the chamber, taking in the smirking faces and dismissive gestures. He had expected some resistance, but this level of mockery was beyond anything he had anticipated. Yet, as he observed more closely, he began to notice things. Patterns in how each species interacted, gaps in their understanding of each other's technologies, subtle dependencies they seemed unaware of. Perhaps, he thought, There was more to this situation than simple mockery. He just needed time to understand it better. After the humiliating council session, Reed spent his time walking the station's public areas. He carried a simple datapad, making notes that looked like routine diplomatic observations to anyone who glanced his way. But his eyes caught details others might miss. In the station's massive dining area, Reed watched as the luminary representatives floated past tables of eating species with obvious disgust. Their energy-based forms had evolved beyond the need for physical sustenance, but they seemed to have lost all understanding of biological processes. When a young luminary's containment field flickered, they had to call 3 different species experts just to understand if their food might have caused interference. Fascinating, isn't it? A gravelly voice said beside him. Reed turned to find a maintenance worker, his badge identifying him as Tom, one of the few other humans on the station. They're so advanced, they've forgotten the basics. Reed nodded, watching as a Mech Collective member struggled to understand why their perfectly engineered food processing units couldn't handle simple recipe variations. They're specialists, he said quietly. Each species has their domain, and they've pushed it to incredible levels. He spent the next few hours observing the station's medical bay. The advanced healing technologies were impressive, but each species could only treat specific types of problems. A simple case of overlapping symptoms required 5 different specialists, each unable to comprehend the other's fields enough to coordinate effectively. In the engineering section, Reed noticed something even more interesting. The station's systems were a patchwork of different species technologies, each brilliant in isolation, but barely integrated. The Mech Collective handled robotics, the Luminary managed energy distribution, and others dealt with their specific domains. But no one seemed to fully understand how it all worked together. Like 1,000 experts building different parts of a house, Tom commented during their second meeting, but nobody knows how to be a general contractor. Reed thought about Earth's primitive development. Humans still learned multiple fields. Their doctors studied chemistry and biology. Their engineers understood physics and material science. Even their children learned a broad foundation before specializing. In his temporary quarters that evening, Reed reviewed his notes. The Council's mockery of humanity's slower development had blinded them to a crucial truth. Humans had never stopped being generalists. They might not have mastered any single field to the level of these advanced species, but they understood how different fields connected. He opened his computer and began composing a message to Earth. To Earth Central Command. From Ambassador James Reed. Subject: Strategic Assessment. Our perceived weakness may be our greatest strength. The Council species have specialized to the point of dependency. They've advanced so far in their chosen fields that they've lost the ability to understand others. Their mockery of our primitive development masks a crucial vulnerability. They can't handle problems that cross multiple domains. Example: today I watched the station's brightest minds struggle for hours with a simple power fluctuation because the energy experts couldn't understand the mechanical implications, and the engineering experts couldn't grasp the power dynamics. Humanity's primitive approach of maintaining broad knowledge across multiple fields might be exactly what this council needs, even if they don't realize it yet. We're not behind. We're different. We never stopped being generalists. Requesting permission to continue observation. I believe an opportunity will present itself where this distinction becomes crucial. End report. Reed looked out his viewport at the swirling colors of nearby nebula. The Council saw humans as primitive because they were slower to reach the stars. But maybe, he thought, trying to reach the stars wasn't the only measure of advancement. A notification flashed on his screen. Another Council session tomorrow. More mockery to endure. But now, Reed smiled slightly. Let them mock. He had seen enough to know that humanity's greatest weakness might prove to be its greatest strength. They just needed the right moment to prove it. The emergency alarms blared through the station without warning. Reed looked up from his breakfast as the artificial gravity flickered briefly. Around him, Various species rushed in different directions, their previous arrogance replaced by growing panic. Emergency Council Session. The station's AI announced. All representatives report immediately. When Reed entered the council chamber, the usual order had dissolved into chaos. A massive hologram dominated the center of the room, showing a swirling purple-black anomaly that had appeared near the station's main power core. It's clearly a quantum irregularity, the luminary first speaker insisted, his crystalline form pulsing with agitation. We must stabilize it with energy harmonics. Impossible. Processing Unit 7 Alpha countered. Our scans show structural damage to the station's framework. We must deploy repair units immediately. Your repair units would be torn apart by the gravitational distortions, another representative shouted. This is clearly a space-time disturbance. Reed watched as the council devolved into specialized arguments. The luminary understood the energy patterns but couldn't grasp how they affected the station's physical structure. The Mech Collective could calculate structural stresses, but couldn't process how they interacted with the anomaly's quantum effects. Each species saw their piece of the puzzle but couldn't connect it to the others. Tom's voice crackled through Reed's communicator. Sir, you need to see this. Engineering Level 3. Reed slipped out of the chamber and made his way down. The maintenance corridors told the real story. Power conduits overloading, support beams groaning under strange pressures, and emergency systems failing to coordinate with each other. Look at this, Tom said, pointing to a diagnostic screen. The anomaly's causing 3 different problems at once. The power grid's destabilizing, the structural integrity's failing, and there's some kind of quantum effect eating through the containment systems. But nobody can agree which to fix first, because nobody understands all 3 systems. Reed studied the readings. On Earth, problems like this were smaller but not uncommon. Different systems affected each other all the time. Engineers had to understand power systems, materials science, and basic quantum mechanics just to keep a fusion plant running. How long? Reed asked. Maybe 2 hours before the power core goes critical. They've evacuated the nearby sections, but if that core goes... Tom didn't need to finish. Reed rushed back to the council chamber. The argument had gotten worse. Now the thought sphere representatives were insisting they needed to directly interface with the station's eye, while the biological species were demanding chemical solutions to stabilize the affected areas. The power core will breach if we don't act, the first speaker announced. We must focus all resources on containing the energy patterns. The structural damage will destroy us before that matters, Processing Unit 7 Alpha argued. Primary support beams are already failing. Reed stood at his podium, watching the crisis unfold. The Council's mighty civilization, brought to its knees not by an overwhelming force, but by their own inability to handle a problem that crossed multiple fields of expertise. Their hyper-specialization, once a source of pride and progress, had become their greatest weakness. He looked down at his datapad, where he'd been sketching out the connections between the different systems. In that moment, Reed realized that humanity's primitive understanding of multiple fields wasn't just useful, it was essential. They needed someone who could see the whole picture, someone who understood enough about each system to see how they connected. Taking a deep breath, Reed pressed the emergency override on his podium. Every screen in the chamber switched to his input signal. Members of the council, he said firmly, I have a solution, but you'll have to trust a primitive. The council chamber fell silent at Reed's words. Even in crisis, the idea of taking advice from a primitive species seemed to shock them. The first speaker's crystalline form flickered with what might have been indignation. You dare to suggest, the first speaker began, but Reed cut him off by pulling up a holographic display of the station's systems. Look at this not as separate systems, but as one connected whole, Reed said, his voice calm but firm. On Earth, we learned this lesson centuries ago, when our first fusion plants kept failing. We discovered that no single field of science could solve the problems alone. His fingers moved across the display, highlighting connections between systems that the specialized council members had overlooked. The quantum anomaly isn't just affecting the power core. It's creating a feedback loop through the structural supports, which in turn is distorting the containment fields. These are basic principles, Processing Unit 7 Alpha objected. We understand how our systems work. No, Reed corrected. You understand how your individual systems work. But who among you understands how they all work together? He gestured to the various representatives. The luminary perfect energy manipulation, the mech collective masters robotics, the thought spheres excel at information processing. But who looks at how these systems affect each other? Tom's voice came through Reed's earpiece. Power core temperature rising. 90 minutes left, maximum. Reed expanded the display. On Earth, our engineers still study multiple fields because we have to. Our technology isn't advanced enough to work perfectly on its own. We have to understand how everything connects. He highlighted a series of interconnected systems. Your power grid is amazing, but it's not just about energy. It's about material science, quantum mechanics, and structural engineering all at once. The chamber erupted in overlapping arguments again until the station shuddered violently. Several anti-gravity platforms crashed to the ground. Enough, Reed shouted over the chaos. You want to see how primitives solve problems. Watch. He pulled up a new display, showing a simplified version of the station's systems. First, we need to understand that this isn't three separate problems. It's one problem affecting three interconnected systems. The solution isn't to fix each system separately. It's to use each system to help fix the others. Reed's fingers flew across the controls, drawing from decades of human experience with hybrid technologies. The structural supports you're so worried about. They can be used as waveguides to channel the quantum distortions. The power fluctuations. They can actually help stabilize the containment field if we reverse the polarity of every third conduit. Impossible, the first speaker declared. The energy patterns would work perfectly, Reed interrupted, if you stopped thinking like a pure energy being for one moment and remembered that energy and matter are connected. Something every human schoolchild learns. He brought up a simulation showing his solution. We use the mech collective's repair units to modify the structural supports. These supports then channel the quantum distortions into a pattern the luminary can control. The contained energy gets fed back into the power grid through a series of step transformers, creating a self-stabilizing loop. The council members stared at the display. The solution wasn't particularly advanced in any single field. Instead, it took basic principles from multiple sciences and combined them in ways the specialized council members had never considered. This is unorthodox, Processing Unit 7 Alpha admitted. It's human, Reed corrected. We never had the luxury of perfect solutions in single fields. We had to learn to make different technologies work together. Now we have 75 minutes until the core breaches. Should we keep arguing about whether a primitive solution can work, or should we start implementing it? The station shuddered again, harder this time. In the following silence, every eye in the chamber turned to the first speaker. The first speaker's crystalline form pulsed with rapid colors before he finally spoke. Proceed with the human's plan. We have no choice. Reed wasted no time. Tom, begin reconfiguring the power conduits in Section 7. Processing Unit 7 Alpha, I need your repair units in these locations. He highlighted several critical structural points on the station's diagram. First speaker, have your energy specialists ready to contain and redirect the quantum distortions once we establish the waveguides. The station trembled again as various teams rushed to their positions. Reed stood at the central control console, coordinating the efforts of species that had barely cooperated before. Through his earpiece, Tom reported on the power conduit modifications. This is absurd, one of the thought sphere representatives projected. Having mechanical units modify structural supports to affect energy patterns, it defies specialized protocols. That's exactly the point, Reed replied. adjusting the holographic display to show the work in progress. Look at how the modified supports are already beginning to channel the quantum distortions. Your technologies aren't meant to work this way because you never thought to combine them like this. The Mech Collective's repair units moved with incredible precision, following Reed's instructions to alter the support beams. Each modification created pathways for the quantum distortions to flow in controlled patterns. It wasn't the most advanced solution, but it was working. Power conduits reconfigured, Tom reported, ready for energy redirection. Reed turned to the first speaker. Now comes the crucial part. Your energy specialists need to guide the quantum distortions through the waveguides we've created. Not at full power. That would overwhelm the system. Think of it like pouring water through a series of small channels instead of one large dam. The luminary representatives positioned themselves around the affected areas. Their crystalline forms glowed brightly as they began manipulating the energy patterns. At first, nothing seemed to happen. "It's not working," Processing Unit 7 Alpha announced. "The quantum readings are still." "Wait," Reed interrupted, pointing to the display. "Watch the pattern." Slowly, the chaotic energy started flowing through the modified structural supports. The quantum distortions, instead of tearing the station apart, were being channeled into controlled streams. The power grid's fluctuations began to stabilize as the energy was fed back through the step transformers. "Remarkable," the first speaker admitted, watching the readings. "The structural supports are actually strengthening as the energy flows through them." "How did you know this would happen?" "Because on Earth, we learned that the best solutions often come from understanding how different systems affect each other," Reed explained. "We couldn't afford to develop perfect energy manipulation or perfect structural engineering. Instead, we learned to make different technologies work together." The station's shuddering gradually ceased. Emergency lights switched back to standard illumination. The quantum anomaly, now controlled and channeled, was actually helping to power the station instead of destroying it. "Core temperature dropping," Tom reported. "Structural integrity returning to normal. It's working." Reed watched the final readings stabilize. The solution wasn't elegant by Council standards. It didn't showcase mastery of any single field. Instead, it demonstrated something the Council had forgotten: the power of understanding how different technologies could work together. "How long will this solution last?" the first speaker asked. "With proper maintenance, indefinitely," Reed replied. "The quantum distortions are now part of the station's power grid, controlled by your energy specialists, flowing through channels maintained by mechanical units. It's not a temporary fix. It's a permanent improvement." The Council chamber was quiet as the implications sank in. A primitive human solution had not only saved the station, but had created a more stable system by combining technologies in ways the specialized Council members had never imagined. In the hours following the crisis, the Council chamber had transformed. Where there had once been mockery of human primitiveness, now there was an awkward silence. Council members gathered in small groups, studying the displays that showed Reed's hybrid system at work. "Explain it again," the first speaker requested, his crystalline form now showing colors of curiosity rather than condescension. "How did you know the quantum distortions could be channeled through the structural supports?" Reed walked through the central display area, where holographic diagrams showed the station's modified systems. "On Earth, we learned early that problems rarely stay within neat categories. When our first space stations faced power issues, we couldn't just focus on the energy systems. We had to understand how they affected the station's structure, how the structure affected the crew's health, how the life support systems impacted the power grid. But such broad knowledge is inefficient," Processing Unit 7 Alpha argued, though with less certainty than before. "Specialization allows for deeper understanding." "Does it?" Reed gestured to the readouts. "Your specialized knowledge goes deeper than ours in each field, yes. But you've lost something crucial: the ability to see how everything connects." Tom approached with a new set of readings. "Sir, The modified systems are actually working better than the originals. Power efficiency is up by 12%, and structural integrity has improved in the affected sections. The council members murmured among themselves. Reed could see them struggling with a fundamental shift in their understanding. Their advanced technology, divided into perfectly specialized fields, had been improved by what they considered primitive hybrid solutions. "We're getting requests from other station sections," Tom added. "They want to implement similar modifications to their systems. Seems everyone's noticed the improvements." A thought sphere representative floated forward. "This crosses all our established protocols. Each species is responsible for their own technological domain. What you suggest would require cooperation, integration." "Exactly," Reed said. "That's what humanity can offer the Council. We may not have mastered any single field to your level, but we understand how to make different technologies work together. Sometimes the most advanced solution isn't about pushing one field further. It's about finding new ways to combine existing knowledge." The first speaker's form pulsed thoughtfully. "The station's systems are operating more efficiently than they have in centuries. And this was achieved not through advancing any single technology, but by connecting them." Reed nodded. "On Earth, we have a saying, 'Jack of all trades, master of none.'" He paused, seeing the confusion in the council members' expressions. It was meant as an insult once, suggesting someone who knew a little about many things but wasn't an expert in anything. But we learned that understanding how different fields connect is its own form of mastery. Processing Unit 7 Alpha moved to a display showing the modified power grid. "Our protocols never considered using structural elements as energy conduits. The possibility existed, but no single specialist would have seen it. We each knew our part too well to see the whole." "That's what humanity can bring to the Council," Reed said. "We're not just asking to learn from you. We're offering something in return, the perspective of a species that never stopped looking at the bigger picture." Around the chamber, the mood had shifted dramatically from the previous day's mockery. Council members were examining their own systems with new eyes, seeing possibilities they'd never considered. Some were already forming mixed teams to explore other potential integrations. Tom smiled as he watched various species actually working together for the first time. "Guess being primitive isn't so bad after all." Reed shook his head. "We're not primitive, Tom. We're different, and sometimes different is exactly what's needed." 1 week after the crisis, the council chamber was packed for a special session. The agenda had only one item: Earth's application for membership. Reed stood at the central podium. But this time the faces looking back at him showed interest rather than mockery. "Members of the council," the first speaker began, his crystalline form glowing with formal colors, "we are here to revisit humanity's petition for full membership. Recent events have challenged our previous assumptions." Reed looked around the chamber. The various species representatives were still grouped by type, but he noticed something new: interfaces and connection points between their sections, inspired by the hybrid systems now running throughout the station. "Before we vote," Processing Unit 7 Alpha announced, "Ambassador Reed has requested to address the Council one final time." Reed stepped forward, his simple blue uniform standing out among the elaborate technological displays surrounding him. "When I first arrived here, you saw humanity as primitive because we hadn't specialized to your level. Our technology wasn't as advanced in any single field. Our methods seemed crude and inefficient." He gestured to the station's systems diagram hovering above. "But look at what's happened in just 1 week. 20 different sections of this station now use hybrid systems inspired by Earth's approach. Power efficiency is up by 15%. Structural integrity has improved in all modified areas. Different species are actually working together instead of just existing side by side." The chamber was silent, listening. Even the thought spheres had stopped their usual background communication to focus on his words. "Humanity's greatest strength isn't in mastering any single field," Reed continued. "It's in understanding how different fields connect. We never reached the technological peaks you did, because we never stopped climbing multiple mountains at once. And from that broader perspective, we can see paths between peaks that specialists might miss. He brought up a new display showing the modified station systems working in harmony. This station is now stronger not because we advanced any single technology, but because we found new ways to combine technologies that already existed. That's what humanity offers the Council. Not expertise in one field, but the ability to see connections between all fields. The first speaker moved forward. You have shown us something we had forgotten in our rush to advance. True progress isn't just about pushing individual technologies to their limits. It's about understanding how everything works together. The Council has voted. Processing Unit 7 Alpha announced. Earth's application for full membership has been approved unanimously. A quiet ripple of agreement moved through the chamber, but Reed wasn't finished. "Thank you," he said. "But membership isn't enough. I propose something more. Earth will gladly learn from your advanced technologies. But in return, we want to establish a new Council division, one focused on technological integration and hybrid solutions, a place where different species can learn to combine their knowledge in new ways." The chamber erupted in discussion. The idea of deliberately mixing different species' technologies went against centuries of tradition. But they couldn't argue with the results they'd already seen. "Approved," the first speaker declared after a brief consultation. "Humanity will lead this new division." After all, his form flickered with what might have been humor. Who better to teach integration than the species that never stopped being generalists? As Reed looked around the chamber, he saw the future taking shape. Humanity had found its place not by trying to match the Council's specialization, but by showing the value of their different approach. They would help build bridges between the peaks of achievement, creating something greater than any single field could achieve alone. "Welcome to the Council, Ambassador Reed," the first speaker said. "It seems we have much to learn from our not-so-primitive neighbors after all." For the first time in Council history, the chamber filled with genuine laughter from all species. The age of isolation was over. The age of integration had begun.